with us, one of the most well-researched people I know on the Epstein story, a story that day after day has escalated to the point where it's now burning out of control, threatening to burn down the political establishment. Obviously, there's stuff on both sides they are worried about. We've got Trump suing Rupert Murdoch, and it's just gone completely bonkers. So, huge thank you for coming on, Kirby. All of Kirby's links, including her YouTube channel, they're all at the top of the description box if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you want to get even more detail than we can talk about on YouTube due to community guidelines, we're going to tell you how to go over to Kirby's platform, Substack, etc., to get absolutely everything. So thanks for coming back, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me back, Shaun, especially at this time. I mean, you opened it in the manner that is happening. I mean, the pushback and ever-changing story about the JE files and the obvious cover-up under Donald Trump's administration, it's a historic moment. And like literally for the first time, we, the public, refuse to be lied to anymore. And as much as transparency is needed for the victims of JE, all survivors of the elite and powerful so-called, let's say, masters of the universe, myself included, our cries, our screams for some sort of justice, even if only in the court of public opinion, we're finally being heard. So good has come out of this cover-up. The story is back in the news, big time, bigger than ever before. And it's not just us chickens, right, in the back row talking about this with each other. Mainstream, which is still CIA controlled to present day, they're talking to really, again, incredible moment in history. Don't you agree it's a historical turning point?
I have never seen so many clips of people shown. I mean, people pounding the table to say they were going to release the Epstein files, and then contrary clips showing them presently completely denying their existence. It's Candace Owens described it as upside down world, and it's just such a blatant slap in the face to the public, the supporters, and everybody who has been campaigning to expose these monsters. But the bigger picture is they're also indicating that they don't care about people who go after children, and that just hits the heart of any human being who's got feelings. They have to be utter psychopaths to be covering up such a big issue as this.
Which they are. I mean, we know historically that's the way they roll, right? However, I think it's more than just Donald Trump's, let's say, like the biggest thing is for him not to be exposed as being, quote, part of this thing. I think there's more to this. And after I share, and I hope we have time to share what I'd like to share with you guys, and this is like, this is an exclusive. The only people that know what I'm going to share with Shaun and his followers, it's only been shared on my Substack with my followers, because I've been investigating this group of miscreants for over 20 years. And really, from the time of J.E.'s arrest on July 6, 2019, I have been deep diving, dot connecting every single day. And all of you know this. And today I'm going to be sharing highlights from just 2 of my 350 or so articles. And by the way, I have over 20 books on top of it. But these articles, I keep them on Substack. And it is my contention that just like Alexander Acosta, let's remember Alexander Acosta, back off, over my pay grade, he belongs to intelligence. It is my contention, and I believe many of you will be able to see, because I'm going to explain this with receipts. Shaun has some pictures he's going to share with you as I talk. We've been like working carefully to make sure this comes across loud and clear for you guys. I am of the conviction that Trump has been told to back off. And I'm going to show how JE is connected not only to Mossad, which is primarily what the masses hear, but also to CIA. And frankly, there are other intelligence agencies with whom he had a relationship. But I will be primarily explaining the CIA connection, which will explain why Trump is pushing back so hard. And for that, I think it's important for all of us to remember that Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father, is and really best remembered as Israel's super spy, primarily because of the book of the same name by Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon. But Maxwell was set up in the publishing industry in the UK by MI5. I've got some names. I've got names. I cover this in my work. And anyone who has studied Maxwell knows that he also had covert intel ties to Russia. And publishing has always been a spy's nest. It's like that's where they keep their spies. Give them a newspaper to run. It's perfect cover. So we know that from Robert Maxwell. As a side note, because nobody knows this, except again for us chickens, right? Donald Trump's father, Fred, is alleged to have been provided, let's call them little people, because what word can we use? Minors? By a survivor. Okay, minors. By a survivor of the Franklin allegations, also referred to as a hoax, by the way. And despite the fact that there have been 2 books and 1 documentary about this subject, Fred Trump has never been disclosed except for right here on your show right now. Also not disclosed are some people who cross over from Franklin into JE. So it's not like, again, everybody likes to compartmentalize these. And I'm going to name just 2, and then I'm going to start with my articles. The first would be a former U.S. Senator from Ohio. Ohio, ring a bell, people? Leslie Wexner. And one of the first NASA astronauts, John Herschel Glenn, born in 1921. I have to say on a live, I apologize. We have to be very careful. We use code words too. In 2016. So that person was clearly involved as a very good friend of Craig Spence in the Franklin situation, very close friend of JE. We see him on the flight logs. We see him with Wexner. The second person I'm going to share, which has, again, crossover, Jack Nicholson, Hollywood superstar. So I met a guy by the name of Jamie Crawford who did a deep dive. I had also connected Jack Nicholson to the Franklin case because I have depositions and conversations from other survivors of that other hoax. And in the very long, maybe 60-page or so deposition, he mentioned Jack Nicholson. So I uploaded that to my Patreon, I believe, in March of this year. And then I bumped into Jamie Crawford because I noticed that he had tried to expose that Nicholson was provided a known JE survivor, been like she's been on a lot of shows and she's just been given Epstein compensation funds, so on and so forth. And he tried to upload a podcast that he did, a very great professional podcast with photographs and like connecting the dots. And it was removed from Reddit. So I can no longer even post anything on Reddit. We have a lot of gatekeepers where we least expect them. You would expect that the Epstein Reddit, I can't upload anything to news on Reddit. And we could remember that Ghislaine is alleged to have been the #1 Reddit user, Maxwell Hill, right? So anyway, so there are 2 people. And there are more, by the way, but I just thought I would bring to everybody's attention Jack Nicholson and a few more names that maybe people are not kind of like, familiar with. So the first article that I'm going to share is Who's Afraid of Jeffrey Epstein? And I answered Donald Trump for one, the cover-up explained. And this is just part 1 of a multi-part series. And so I'm gonna begin with like 2 sort of quotes. One is from George White, who was in charge of those houses back, in the day, one in San Francisco, one in New York, with the 2-way mirror where they were dosing people unexpectedly. And he wrote to Sidney Gottlieb in 1971, "Of course, I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, and cheat, steal, deceive, our word, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" That's George White to Sidney Gottlieb in 1971. Now, in 1954, Isser Harel, the director of Mossad, met with Allen Dulles. This is from my book, J.E. Predator Spy, and presented him with an engraved dagger. And it read, "The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps." He responded with these words, "You can count on me to stay awake with you." These words cemented the partnership between Mossad and CIA. That's why I think people just get things one side only. And I just want to say that the co-author of Robert Maxwell, Israel Super Spy, is someone that I befriended. I know that Professor Hamamoto befriended the other one, Borton Thomas. He visited him. He went to England to visit him. I thought that was just pretty cool. So I befriended Martin Dillon. And Martin Dillon does not believe Ari Ben Menashe. I do not believe Ari Ben Menashe's story. And Martin Dillon was so upset with everything that he took himself off of X. Just FYI. So, we have to be careful what we listen to. In any event, I'm going to start with part one of a multi-part article. The others are on my Substack. And then I'm going to share with you another one, which is really where I push hard on why Trump is scared. So I'm going to begin in the aftermath of Watergate. And by the way, Shaun, if you want to question me while I'm doing this, let me know, okay?
Yes.
So in the aftermath of Watergate, when the CIA was busy defending themselves and their agents from investigations by domestic authorities, the Bank of Credit and Commerce, BCCI, later referred to as the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International, became the go-to vehicle for the agency. It was a fraud of gigantic proportions and involved money laundering, child transportation, bribery, gun running, substance transportation, and terrorism, to name a few. Donald Trump's Justice Department, the decision not to release the JE files and basically ordering them to stand down, has more to do with CIA and its illegal activities than it does with Trump being on the list. So in June, we know that Musk taunted the president by posting on X, "Time to drop the really big bomb. At Donald Trump is in the JE files." That is the real reason they have not been made public. "Have a nice day, DJT." He followed with, "Mark this for the future. The truth will come." And he ended it with, "The truth will come out," and he has since deleted his post. Now, when that came out, what did you think? Because it's gone.
I was watching the value of Tesla go down in the stock market rapidly, and I was just thinking, this is just like a high school spat here now. And the way they just went at it was I mean, you got like one of the most powerful men in the world going at it with one of the most powerful politicians versus the most powerful business people. I've never expected to see anything like that in my lifetime. Just going bam, bam, like little kids on social media.
Now, here's the thing. I don't think Musk knows more than what he knows, right? I mean, he's good with what he does. I don't think that he's really good with American history. We have to remember he was born in South Africa, then he spent some time in Canada, and then he's basically involved himself into, let's say, a U.S. administration. Not a lot of people really last with Donald Trump. And so I knew he was going to last less than 6 months, and it's true. However, it is true that there's something going on, right? I mean, he is scared of something, but it's bigger, I believe, again, that his name is on the list, which we all know. I mean, his name has been public information for a really long time. It's in the flight logs, it's in the black book, it's in all the photographs that we see every single day now. Okay. But we have that lawsuit. And I want to just say a little bit about that lawsuit by the 13-year-old girl who used not her real name just before the first time that he took office in 2016. She was represented by a well-known attorney and became afraid because of threats against her life. I have had not just threats against my life. I have a podcast on my YouTube channel showing what was left of my apartment after I was kept hostage at knife point for 5 days, managing by I don't know what because the police would not come. I called them twice as he was trying to get in through the window. However, when you are someone they want to silence, they will threaten you, if not come after you and unalive you. I managed to escape. I continue to be very careful about where I go, who I let into my life, and even whose podcast I show up on, right? However, the 13-year-old girl, she didn't have any money when she filed this claim against Donald Trump and JE. However, she started to receive threats. The attorney that was representing her suddenly said to her, well, we're going in and we're going to do a press conference. And the girl got scared and she backed away. Now, I happen to know that someone who does investigate these things found her. In fact, several people have, quote, found her, which as a victim and a survivor myself of the same people, it feels very intrusive and stalkerish. You know, like when I had a lot of people contact me in July of 2019, coming out of the woodwork, I was terrified. And for that, and they all reached out to me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm in danger because I don't know who these people are, right? Because we already know through the stories we've heard from the JE survivors, including Juliette Bryant, who was beaten up by somebody she trusted at her home, that they insert people into our lives, like maybe that happened with Virginia, right? So that someone has tracked her down. She doesn't want to return his emails. And I'm thinking, leave her alone. He claims, okay, well, she's living a normal life. She's in real estate. Well, that's what I did. I went into real estate. I was thinking I was living a normal life, but I wasn't, because everything I did was interfered with. This is what they do. They interfere with, so that the girl, I didn't go to court. I didn't collect millions of dollars. I just tried to just keep going, put it behind me, just like this 13-year-old victim. But the girl that a lot of people thought was unalived was a girl who was 12 by the name of Maria. This was very detailed in the lawsuit that she filed herself. She then backed away, and there is pushback against believing this. Why? Why would there be? We know that JE, for example, was gifted triplets that were only 12 years old from Jean-Luc Brunel in the modeling field. The modeling field provided Donald Trump with Melania. And I'll come back one day and I'll tell you all about Melania that nobody knows about. But that is what, you know, so that there's just there are a lot, let's just say that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of pushback, and there are people that should be believed, like that lawsuit that she dropped. I mean, they were best friends for 15 years. I don't think that it's now something that's unknown, let's say, right? So in any event, he won the presidency, and he promised during his second presidential run that if elected, he would release all the JE files. And so had he gone ahead and dropped these unseen documents, photos, and even videos, it would have however, opened a Pandora's box so big that its subsequent scandal would have eclipsed those of BCCI, Watergate, the Church Committee hearings of 1975, and Iran-Contra, all rolled up into one, because if one studies these, you'll discover they're all connected. We have a thread that connects this. We have threads into CIA, we have threads into Mossad, and guess what? They interweave with JE. They all interweave with JE. And so I think we're going to be able to clarify this as I keep going. Okay, so the list of people who have been permanently silenced, as in unalive, to keep a portion of this from leaking to the public is incalculable. Hundreds, if not thousands, of witnesses have been at the receiving end by professional, like, unalivers. Okay, just there are these people, they go around, and I again, I'm going through the highlights of my article. The details, I show proof and provide examples of some of the people who have been permanently silenced. It's on my Substack, but I'm going to just go into JE's very first standalone business, let's say, after he leaves Bear Stearns. So in August 1981, he opens his very first consulting firm, and he names it International Assets Group Incorporated. Basically, he calls it IAG, where he helped clients recover stolen money from fraudulent brokers and attorneys. So years ago, when I was researching for my book, J.E. Predator Spy, I thought it interesting that he used the same initials as American International Group, AIG. So I sent you a photo of the person who created AIG. AIG is the insurance firm. No, AIG is the Starr person, the old guy, that very old photograph.
Okay, so Cornelius Starr.
Yes.
There he is. Let me make him bigger. Right,
Yeah,
he's on the
that's
screen.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So AIG is an insurance firm, but they have been an intelligence front for the United States since its inception. Kenneth Starr, and I'm going to go into it a little bit more. Kenneth Starr, whose name I think everybody will remember as being not only JE's attorney, but also as being attorney for Donald Trump. Well, he is he's related. So, like, there's a thing. If one is in intelligence, if one's family member, like this man that I'm going to discuss in a minute, the original Starr, is in intelligence, it's a very good likelihood that they're offspring, and they're, people that they marry, and because it's a very tight knit group, so that you trust, you bring in your family members. It's sort of like you inherit being, let's say, in the club. So, like, Kenneth Starr was really a super lawyer, and he was a judge, and he's best remembered by the public at large as being the independent counsel who authored the Starr Report, which led to the impeachment of President Bill Clinton in 1998. What most people don't know about that is that was most of it. I think people may understand now that when we have these open to the public, being televised, like the Church Committee hearings or the Iran-Contra hearings or whatever hearings, that these are just a play, a performance. So independent counsel, you can present or not present whatever you want. And, part of that was to hide a couple of unalivements. And, it was just a show for the public. However, he was also U.S. Solicitor General from 1989 to 1993 during the presidency of George H.W. Bush. He was selected by Donald Trump in 2019, along with Alan Dershowitz, to defend him during his first impeachment for abuse of power and obstruction of justice. So what we're seeing, but I want to get into who this other star is. What we're seeing is that it's more than, let's say, Alexander Acosta or all of the many people that seem to have been connected to JE and then connected to Trump. I mean, the list is endless. We can go to Stephen Mnuchin even. The list is endless. So this old guy who's very unattractive with the little bow tie, his name is Cornelius Vander Starr. Starr, meaning, Kenneth Starr is the grandnephew of Cornelius Vander Starr. And in 1919, he founded CV Starr and Company in Shanghai, China. So when Japan invaded China in 1939, he moved to New York to work for the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which we know as the precursor to the CIA. Starr, he was a spy at heart. He didn't even want to be called by his name because his name was so unusual, Cornelius. So he had people just call him Neil. So that if you call him Neil, he's going to blend in, right? So he opened a subsidiary and he named it American International Group, AIG. AIG was perhaps the first international finance and insurance company in the world, and he became an intelligence asset under the Roosevelt presidency, although some suspect that he had been an asset in waiting before this. And he established this OSS linked insurance intelligence offshoot with William Will Bill Donovan. We all know that name. He was then head of the OSS. So here's the thing, insurance agents traveling to foreign destinations were the perfect cover for the OSS. And he gave the unit an innocuous name. He called it American Volunteer Group. But here's the thing, it was kind of like a misnomer because these were guys that were in the military. They were in the army, the navy, the this, the that. So they weren't like volunteers. They were actually serving. But they proceeded to fund a mission to drive out the Japanese and reinstall Generalissimo or whatever, Chiang Kai-shek to power in China. And that mission is now known as the Flying Tigers, which you guys can look into. However, you're not going to necessarily know that OSS trained the pilots for the Flying Tigers covert operation. So Neil, he became extremely wealthy. And the OSS, along with all of the money that he was making on the side doing all of these shenanigans, right? They backed this coup. And we know that the OSS, CIA has been involved historically with overthrowing other governments, right? Now, J.E., the bounty hunter who selected the same initials, I was just like, oh, this is weird. Let me just keep looking at this. So he really liked playing games by placing clues in plain sight with his Intercontinental Assets Group being perhaps his first full foray into the world of, let's say, cloak and dagger. He initially ran IAG from his luxury apartment building at East 66th Street. So, Shaun, you have that, like it's an apartment building. It's a very tall skyscraper in New York, which is going to lead us to some very interesting people. The one that says East 66th Street, for where J.E., he was running his business from his apartment.
Yeah, so you just want the document on the screen.
Yes, please.
Okay, 1 second. Right, and I've got so many open right now. Here we go. Share this one. Okay, here we go.
Okay,
there we
so
go.
The way mainstream interprets this is not the way we're interpreting this. The way they interpret this is though, oh, he was running his first company from his apartment on East 66th Street. Well, that's a luxury apartment building with very, very interesting ties. And so we can see there, Intercontinental Assets Group. And this is, we can see when he dissolved it, which is very interesting by itself, because that is when power of attorney by Leslie Wexner is given to him. I mean, so what I did was, and by the way, if you guys want the full address, it's in the article on my Substack. Again, I'm just giving you an overview of the highlights of that specific article. So that building, again, is a skyscraper in New York City. It was then owned by a developer by the name of Sheldon Solo, who stopped breathing on November 17, 2020. However, he was born on July 20th, 1928. His birth name is Soloviev, right? And he's described as a real estate developer and art collector. In 1972, he got married for the second time. This time, a former fashion and costume designer who had attended the private Dalton School. Sound familiar, anyone? Everything from the Dalton School, where J.E. was hired in 1974, to the woman that he marries in 1972, whose name is Mia von Sagreves. And that's going to take us to some very interesting people. However, I just want to insert here something that I did not include in the article. In 1974, J.E. was at New York University. In 1974, there was a leak of these documents from the CIA, which were given to. Let me see. I should have everything here. Well, I mean, there was that leak. Remember, it was shy of 700 pages given to Seymour Hersh, who ran with the story in the New York Times about a lot of the illegal things that the CIA was doing within the United States, which they do not have a mandate to do. They're supposed to be an out-facing agency, okay? However, in 1974, and by the way, what I want to add to this is that universities have been, if you go back in history, even my abuser's father after the war, because he, with Robert Maxwell, they were in World War II together. They knew each other from back then. Maxwell was kept in the UK, where he was made an asset for the UK with the newspaper. Rickless was transferred to the United States, and he was tucked into Ohio State University in Ohio, where he would eventually, of course, team up with Leslie Wexner. What I want to say about NYU, and this again kind of circles back to Trump, is that a man by the name of Eviem Seller, an Israeli businessman and former commander in the Israeli Air Force, well, he recruited Jonathan Pollard while he was at NYU. And Jonathan Pollard, I think many of you may know that name. I mean, he was served a 30-year sentence for spying on the United States for Israel. However, Donald Trump, during his first administration, pardoned Sella during the morning of January 20th, 2021, on the same day that he left the office. My point being that the New York University, where J.E. was, is a holding, let's call it a holding pen for intel assets, okay? So suddenly in 1974, we find J.E. working at the Dalton School, which, not very coincidentally, is also connected to the man who owns the apartment building where he has his very first apartment in New York City for his very first business that he basically models after a CIA operation, AIG, that is connected to one of his very big shot attorney, Starr. Okay. And again, connected to Donald Trump. So we have all of these like interconnections already between these people. And it just keeps going. These are the years of JE being the bounty hunter. All right, let's just go into what this connects us to. Mia's mother is a woman by the name of Lisa von Sagreves Penn, and she was known as, quote, the world's first supermodel. We keep having this theme of models with these very powerful men. And let's say before embarking on her 2-decade career, which spanned from the 1930s through the 1950s, she posed for photographers such as Richard Avedon and Man Ray. Now, there's a lot about Man Ray that we can talk about, including the unalivement of Elizabeth Short, otherwise known as the Black Dahlia, which I connect to Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando and Chandler, the Chandler family, on my Substack. So I'm not going to get into this here. However, this woman, this big model at the time, her original name was Anderson. She is related to Eva Anderson. They're from Uddevalla, Sweden. And so therefore, that the very first apartment that J.E. moved into in Manhattan, the mother-in-law of the owner of the building is connected to Eva Anderson, now known as Eva Anderson Dubin. It's not the fact that this is a small world. It's a fact that J.E. walked into a pre-existing, ongoing operation. And he was provided this very luxurious apartment that people in the mainstream denigrate as being, the small one-bedroom apartment, and they only say East 66th Street. They don't say that it's an enormous thing. Now, the other thing that this connects to is that this very same developer, let's say, also built. Oh, do you want to show the JE with Eva, his fake girlfriend, that was provided to him as a cover? It's very clear to me, and again, if you go to the article, you'll see all the dots connected. I sent you a photo of Eva, and yeah. Oh, it came out small. So here, I think that, don't you find it interesting that these are two relatively unknown people, right? Right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. Yes.
And don't you think it's interesting that there were so many photos taken of these two unknown people that even we can find to present day?
They've come out of obscurity to be manufactured into the network.
Yeah, they're both in the network. I have another article showing that she's had plastic surgery, that she changed her age, that she's not who she pretends to be, but they were just as constructed, let's say, as the relationship between he and Ghislaine. So she was Ghislaine before Ghislaine. But I just thought it interesting that no one has ever questioned, well, these two at this moment in time during the 1980s, who knows these two people? Why are there photographs of them getting on an airplane, posing, hugging, him sitting in the audience? That alone is very unusual. However, now we know why. These were assets in the beginning of, let's say, their careers, because she too was an asset. Okay. So Solo built 9 West 57th Street. 9 West 57th Street is considered a New York City landmark. It's a building that you cannot miss. And among its tenants is Leon Black's Apollo Global Management. That is also not a coincidence. Black is JE's second largest financial contributor, with Leslie Wexner being the first and most important. And by the way, Wexner through this connection of Solo, in part 2, will be making an appearance. Okay. However, we see now the appearance of Eva Anderson, Leon Black, through these kind of interesting channels that we can link back to CIA, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now Black also made JE director of his foundation in 2001 all the way through 2012, 4 years after the so-called guilty plea, right? So-called
Mhm.
guilty plea. Okay. Well, then we have that photo that you're showing with Donald Trump, and right next to him, the man holding the what looks like a drink mixed with OJ, like meaning orange juice. And by the way, Donald Trump, Leon Black, Leslie Wexner, Michelle Rickless, Ira Rickless, they know not to drink. So that's probably really just juice. They know not to drink because they know about all of the honey traps, and they know all because they run it. They run all of these. So they're not going to, the only thing that's going to get them is their attraction to, the S word, let's say. But they're not going to, let's say, be knocked out or something because they know to be careful. So, but we see them here, Donald Trump and Leon Black in Russia in 1995. Now, Black's career began as Michael Milken's right hand man at Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert. We know this company, and if you guys don't, you know, do some search on it. But there's a lot more to Drexel that, again, I cover on my Substack. However, just before leaving office in February of 2020, Donald Trump, then the president, granted clemency to Milken, who had been disgraced for one of the biggest Wall Street gigantic scandals in the history of mankind. Again, another person granted clemency. The question is going to be later, is he going to do this with Ghislaine, who's pushing really hard, right? But maybe we'll get there. But these are not coincidences. Okay, so let's get back to JE. So during the 1980s, he describes himself as a high-level bounty hunter, and he's telling friends that he worked for governments and wealthy individuals recovering embezzled funds. And he also begins to boast that he's CIA. And you know what? He wasn't lying. So I shared with you a photo that we can't really show here, but Anna Obregon was among his first clients, and there is a photograph of her on the cover of Playboy Spain. We know that Playboy takes us to Hugh Hefner, it takes us to the tunnels. Hefner already is also CIA run. It's also not only has the cameras everywhere, it is where, let's say, Jack Nicholson is. So it shouldn't surprise us that Nicholson came up in the Franklin case or in the JE case. However, let's get back to Anna. She was an early client, a Spanish actress, and an heiress. She appeared as Bo Derek's sidekick in the 1984 film Bolero. And I think everybody remembers Bo Derek, right? Or at least there should be some memory. Do you remember that name, Bo Derek?
I remember all these names. I remember when Michael Milken was the junk bond king. He filed the highest ever recorded income in the history of taxes. And then all of a sudden, it all completely melted down. There was this era of these hostile corporate takeovers. And I think Soros came in then and filed the highest, an even higher income than Milken. So, yeah, I grew up on all these stories. Bo Derek was very famous when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was actually Michelle Rickless who taught Michael Milken. Michael Milken, like Donald Trump, and like uh, Joe Biden, they're graduates of the Wharton of Wharton. Now, Wharton produces spies. Just FYI. I don't think people really know that. So Obregon's father is Antonio Garcia Fernandez, who during his time was a high-powered businessman, and he lost money in another financial scandal in the 1980s. Oh, it was called the Drysdale Affair. And he hadn't always been rich, right? So he was poor during the Spanish Civil War. I was able to dig this up about 6 years ago when I began working every single day. But now there's nothing. It's all been scrubbed, okay, about her father and her family and who she is. But somehow he built a real estate empire selling land to the very wealthy. Now, the Drysdale Securities Corporation was a broker dealer selling United States Treasury bonds, notes, and bills. And you would know this very well from your history, being in that industry. Now, the firm lost approximately, and remember, this is 1980, 290 million. And in an ill-fated attempt to hide their deficit, they created a new shell, like another company within a company, and they named that Drysdale Government Securities. So